Welcome to Tangential Soup, a weekly podcast discussing life in Australia, technology, food, fitness, and the like, hosted by myself, David Keddy, Melburnian, independent developer and tea enthusiast, as well as my good childhood friend, Alexander Carr, Sydney Sider, slave to the man, karate practitioner, and lover of adventure. This week we talk about e-bikes, robot dogs, and the impending Galaxy S9 launch. So, Alex, you had a look at this video/article I sent you describing Harley Davidson's entry into the world of e-bikes. What did you think?
What did I think? Well, I think it's fantastic, and I think obviously it's the direction, as I'm sure our listeners probably know, that I personally think that every manufacturer should be taking, because as we've discussed a lot in the past especially with the developments Tesla are making and other manufacturers, technology behind these electronic vehicles really isn't very far at all behind the vehicles that rely on fossil fuels. And they're cheaper to run, and for me, it just doesn't really make much sense to not be developing in this area. And what Harley Davidson are doing is they're developing the first e-bike, which looks really cool. I think Harley Davidson have kind of taken a step sideways from what their traditional bike model is, which is the really heavy cruisers with huge, this I think is still going to have a fairly big motor in it, but with huge motors in them. Traditionally are famous for being ridden by gang members who murder people.
Yes.
And that's not really what this kind of bike is. It's more of a sports bike. I don't know if they're going to be making a cruiser type of this type of bike, but if you look at the picture, it's still solid, but it's quite sporty as well. And I think their newer bikes that they have in production at the moment are a lot more sporty than they have traditionally been.
Does this appeal more to you than their more traditional bikes?
Well, it appeals more to me because I like the look of it.
Yeah.
I actually had a bike near my house that somebody had obviously bought very recently, because I just noticed it popping up on the street. And that was a Harley Davidson in a very similar style, actually, with the kind of almost very front-heavy look, and the rear wheel is just sticking out the back, supported by the frame and nothing else. And I think it's quite a good-looking bike, but when I was close to it, I appreciated just how big it was. Like, it was a monster bike. And my only thought was that if you dropped it, couldn't get it back up again, because it would weigh several hundred kilos.
Well, I guess that is Harley's MO, though, isn't it? Big, heavy bikes.
Oh, of course, yeah.
Although it is interesting, in particular, that they're a manufacturer that is going this route. I suppose it's somewhat inevitable, but really, this is not going to appeal, I wouldn't have thought, to their core demographic very much.
Well,
so they're going to have to be chasing a different audience for this, I would think. I could be wrong, but, it doesn't have the sound, the look of your traditional Harleys.
No, and it wouldn't ride in the same way either,
no,
because it's more of a sports bike, and they're a lot different to ride than the cruiser styles. I think one of the things that the article said, though, is that bike sales to younger people are declining because, for whatever reason, bikes just aren't as attractive to younger commuters or drivers or travellers, whatever, as cars are. Which from a practical standpoint, of course, makes sense, because you can only carry one person on a bike. If you have a partner that you want to carry around, then it becomes a bit...
Yeah, and the graph of the over 50s is just skyrocketed in the last 10, 20 years.
Yeah, and that's probably just their traditional user base getting older.
Yes.
Because, obviously... Harleys have been around for quite a while, but I don't really think they've been popular for quite a while, unless it was with a very certain type of person. I know I'd never ride a sports cruiser, just because they're heavy and they just don't really appeal to me. But once I get older, perhaps they would, because I know my dad rides motorbikes, and I think that he likes the idea of a sports bike, but when it actually comes to riding them, they're so uncomfortable. Like, you have to kind of crouch over the handlebars and your wrists get sore and your back gets sore. Just from a short ride, there's no way that you could actually ride them over any distance. So if you wanted to take them out for a day or for a couple of days or something, it's just not really a very practical thing to ride, which is where these cruisers come in.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Didn't realize they felt so different, like from an ergonomic standpoint.
Well, it depends on what type of bike they are, because there are kind of hybrid models where you have a cruiser and a sports bike kind of squished in together. But the traditional features of a more comfortable bike to ride are the handlebars are higher, and your seating position is kind of more comfortable and not sitting right up against the fuel tank. But if you kind of look at the look of that, you're kind of leaning right over the fuel tank to get to the handlebars, and then to actually just ride, you have to be kind of in that leaning position as opposed to a more upright position, which would make it more comfortable.
Right. Yeah. Okay. That makes sense.
In my experience, that's the main factor that makes a bike comfortable or uncomfortable to ride.
Have you been getting more value out of your bike recently?
Look, I have been riding it. I actually rode it through the city at night for the first time, which, you know, isn't a huge accomplishment in general, but it was a bit of a milestone for me because I've kind of been avoiding riding at night and when it might rain, just because I'm not 100% confident in my riding abilities yet. But I guess just getting past that, certainly riding at night, I actually found it a bit easier because there wasn't as much traffic around, and people tend to be a bit more relaxed when they're driving at night as opposed to during the day when they're in a hurry to get home from work or go to work or go somewhere else. That
sounds quite nice, cruising around in the city in the evening.
It actually is. Yeah, I had a really nice time. I've got to say, I've got to actually move up to the next level of my license very soon, which involves a riding test. And I'm just trying to decide if I'm actually ready for it or if I really need to make a concerted effort to just be riding on my bike all the time.
What's the next
level?
And
at this stage, I'm not sure. P, so probationary license.
So what are you now? An L?
Learner. Yeah.
Oh, okay, so it's different to cars. I guess it has to be because it's a sort of a single-person vehicle.
Yeah, exactly. You can't ride a motorbike with another person.
So what are the restrictions, then, of a learner on a bike?
So I think there are speed restrictions. Can't go over, I want to say 90 kilometers an hour. Obviously, the same alcohol restrictions apply, which is 0 alcohol. You can't have any rear passengers, so you can't. Pillion passengers, so you can't have anyone sitting behind you.
Yeah,
and you can't ride bikes over a certain power range. So I think they have a power to weight ratio that they work off, and I don't know exactly how it works, but it's something to do with how much the bike weighs versus how many horsepower it has.
You'd probably be ready enough to go to the next level, wouldn't you?
Well, I hope so. I don't actually know, though, to be honest.
Okay.
So I guess the test will show, because the test is obviously a practical test, and for the Ps, it was fairly simple. Like, you had to there's a written test and there was a practical. On the practical, you just really had to show that you were able to sit upright on the bike and change gears in a very basic way. And then you had to listen to all this kind of talking and blah, blah, blah about everything. And then after that, they actually took us around and you had to kind of follow the instructor around. Just a circle, really, I think was all we rode in. And the P plates, I think, is a bit more difficult. You've got to weave through some cones, which I've never done on my bike, so I don't know. I guess we'll see how we go.
You can turn, though, can't you?
I can turn. You know, I have that ability.
And you should be fine.
Yeah, well, I guess we'll see how we go, won't we?
We will indeed. So what's this story about Joel McDonald and his $100 million fortune? Former AFL footballer for Brisbane Lions and also your team, the Demons, Mighty Melbourne?
Yes. So, look, it was really just more of an interest piece than anything that affects anyone in any real way. But was just because I've started to try to read the finance news, or just general news about the market and companies on the ASX. And this story came up, and I looked at him and I thought, I know that name, Joel McDonald. And not obviously don't know it very well, but I do know that name. And I thought, I'm sure I've seen him around somewhere. I think I thought he played sport, or I actually also had the thought, maybe I went to school with him. I didn't go to school with him, obviously. But I knew that I knew the name from my childhood. So I saw him in relation to his company called GetSwift.
Yes.
Which is I think it's a renaming of a business that he ran called Liquor Run, which is it started as an alcohol delivery business, but I think it's actually just evolved into a delivery business in general. So he delivers a wide range of products for retail businesses. And basically what he has done, just to explain the background of the story, is he's kind of almost in a way pulled an Elon Musk in that he's talked up the contracts that his business is negotiating with certain large retailers, but he's done it in a very official way. So he's kind of led the shareholders to believe that these contracts are in the making, a lot of which have turned out to either be not exactly as he has described them, or in the case of a deal with McDonald's, there isn't actually really a deal at all, which I think he had originally kind of suggested there was. Now, what the ASX can do is it can put a trading halt on shares and actually issue a list of public questions to the company that's listed on the exchange, which the company then has to answer. And, they go to their legal team or whatever, and that company would then have to answer those questions and then list those answers for the shareholders to see. And the ASX would then decide if those answers were satisfactory to allow trading of that share again. Otherwise, the trading will continue to be put on hold while the ASX investigates whether or not this company was honest to its shareholders. And if you're not honest to your shareholders, there can be quite severe legal ramifications. You can pay a lot of fines that the ASX would be able to impose. Or I think there can also be criminal proceedings too, based on the fact that you've provided false information, essentially.
Yeah, well, you're misleading your shareholders, like.
Well, exactly. Yeah. And obviously, because these companies are ASX listed companies, they have to answer to essentially the exchange that they trade on, and that's basically what he's got in trouble for, and he seems to have done quite well for himself. I don't know where he got his money from, if he made it himself, or if he's inherited something, but he seems to be quite a rich young man.
I like the deal that they had with Amazon as well, that has no concrete details around it about what it is they're actually doing for Amazon.
Yeah.
There's a deal, but who knows what it means.
Yeah, exactly. So, and this really affects companies as well, because even if a company is a solid company financially, which now I don't know if it is or not, but if a company is a solid company and they're caught, lying with their shareholders, or even just a simple matter of disagreeing with your auditors. Now, your auditors are people who are employed by you, but I remember in the case of Webjet, they had a disagreement where they were trying to, I think they were trying to claim a certain portion of profits they were making through some receipting deal, and their auditors didn't like it, and their shares dropped by like 10% just because they were disagreeing with their auditors over this one thing. And it didn't actually change anything material in the company. But that's just something that, that people seem to get a bit nervous about, or shareholders at least.
Because people thought if there's that one discrepancy, then there could be others and that sort of thing.
Well, yeah, that's it. I suppose it undermines confidence in the company.
Are there any other companies that are under such scrutiny at the moment? Or it's just mainly this one that you know?
Look, there are always companies under scrutiny. You see, the thing is, in terms of the stuff that makes the news, generally speaking, it's only the ASX 200 that make the news for this type of thing. Unless it's something like this. Now, GetSwift isn't in the top 200 companies in Australia, but what makes them notable is that they had the highest or the fastest rising share price on the total ASX, I think.
Okay.
So their company went from, in the last 12 months. So their company would have gone, I don't know what it went from and what it went to, but it was 1,000-something% increase, I think. So people obviously liked it.
Mm. How many companies are on the ASX in total?
Ooh, I want to say about 5,000, but I will verify that fact with a quick bit of Google.
Is the top 200 or top however much determined by their market cap or something else?
Yes.
Okay.
Market cap. So it changes, obviously.
Yeah.
This doesn't help. Google, you know what I'm going to ask you. I don't know.
Playing the game, one thing that I sort of found somewhat interesting is there's a bunch of companies that seem to be New Zealand, or at least headquartered in New Zealand, and I wondered what the restrictions around that were, if anything, or it's just open slather.
Well, so to be listed on the ASX, I don't know, actually. I couldn't tell you.
Because like A2 Milk is headquartered in NZ, and there was a couple of other ones that I saw that seemed to call New Zealand home.
There are, and I know there are actually a lot of companies that work out of kind of the Asia area.
Okay, so it's not
like
just...
especially a lot of the mining companies do a lot of business in Asia, but they're listed on the ASX.
Yeah.
And I assume it's just because they have the Australian portion of their business that they're allowed to do so.
Okay.
And yeah, I don't really know. I mean, I know companies like BHP Billiton, Rio Tinto, they are also listed on other stock exchanges, but I have the feeling that maybe it's just portions of their business that's listed. And because I guess you have to kind of set up a different business arm for each company, perhaps it's just that arm of the business. Sorry, each country rather. Perhaps it's just that arm of the business that's listed, and then the kind of profitability that goes with that arm is the kind of, or performance that goes with that arm is the performance that the shareholders participate in.
Okay, that makes sense then. So New Zealand probably has its own share market, and then they'd be on that as well, and that's how that works.
Yeah, I suppose they do. It's actually a very good question. I don't know if New Zealand does have a share market. And if they don't, perhaps that's the answer to your question, because perhaps New Zealand companies are all listed on the ASX.
Surely they must have something.
And it's actually funny you say that, because I know that Auckland Airport is listed on the ASX.
Yeah, that was, I think, one of the other ones I saw, and I'm like, that's interesting.
Yeah, so maybe it is the case that New Zealand shares are all listed on the ASX, which would make sense, because why would you bother creating your own market when you basically, you share everything with another country anyway?
There does seem to be a New Zealand stock exchange, NZX, but maybe it's not considered to the level of the ASX. Did you like these robot dogs from Boston Dynamics? You've probably seen these videos floating around for some time anyway, but they brought out a new one where they're trying to obstruct the dog from opening the door.
Yes.
Kind of scary.
No, you're right, actually. I read the article before I watched the video, and I thought, well, I don't know. I thought they were being a bit dramatic about it, but it is a bit worrying.
Well, there's two videos. Did you see the bottom one?
Did I see the bottom one? Possibly not. I saw the one where he stops him from going in the door.
Okay, I think that was the bottom one. Yeah.
Yes.
And then the other one...
I've seen the top one as well.
Yeah, the top one is... They've got these two yellow dog-like robots. This company, Boston Dynamics, which Google briefly owned, but now someone else owns them because they sold them off. But they're always coming up with some interesting gear. And in the first video, there's one that comes along and sees where it needs to go as obstructed by a door. And then I guess somehow that relays information to the other one that has the arm that can open the door, and it comes and opens the door, and they both go through. And then the second one, it's just the one that can open the door being obstructed by a man, first with a hockey stick and then with a tether at the back of it. Anyway, I'll have links in the show notes. You should go watch the videos, but it's impressive, no?
Oh, of course it is, yeah.
Yeah.
And the way it acts is pretty creepy, as you said.
It's so determined to open the door.
Yeah.
I really don't know why Google sold these guys.
Yeah, who did they sell them to?
They sold them to Japan's SoftBank Group. Do you know them?
I do not know them, no. Never heard of them.
They're a conglomerate of some description. Products: internet, investment, semiconductors, Internet of Things, artificial intelligence, robotics, and e-commerce. Okay, so it kind of does fit their brand.
Yeah, okay. Well, I think they've done very well because Boston Dynamics get a lot of press.
Well, they do get a lot of attention. Like, whether they're actually that advanced in what they're doing, who knows? But they certainly know how to get coverage.
They do,
which is no bad thing, really. They probably get a lot of probably could get a lot of investment opportunities because of it.
I'm sure they would. What's this tech going to be used for? Do you know? Apart from just general AI stuff.
Well, I mean, this could be used in all sorts of things, but what they always sort of spruik first and foremost as having this as like a rescue operation robot, right?
Right.
You have it, there's like a hazard situation and they want to make sure that everyone's evacuated or see if anyone's, there and they haven't got out for whatever reason, but they don't necessarily want to send people in for straight away. Could even be for siege situations or something, who knows? There's a bomb, that sort of thing. But to have a robot that can just go in and so quickly get through doors.
Yes.
Like, there are robots that can get through doors that are like remotely operated, but not with any of that kind of speed, right? So yeah.
Okay, well, that makes sense.
Are you interested at all about the Galaxy S9 launch?
Am I interested? Well, no, not really.
I didn't think you would be.
I mean, is anybody actually that interested about it? It's just another smartphone. And it doesn't even really seem to be offering anything that's that new or exciting. I know it's got that.
I suppose. But you know how people get excited for Apple's iPhone launches.
Yeah.
Like, there's a lot of press around that. And Samsung are like, probably not quite Apple's level, but they are the premier Android smartphone vendor. And the Galaxy S series is only updated once a year, so it's kind of same schedule as Apple's. So people do get kind of excited to a certain extent. You're right, there doesn't look like there's going to be a heck of a lot new here. It's interesting, though, how much has leaked about this phone. We basically know everything at this point, even though the launch doesn't happen until, for us, later today, but for most of the world, tomorrow, because we're already in the 25th. But yeah, so you're not really taken with this launch video that's been leaked?
No, I'm not, honestly. I mean, it doesn't really tell me anything to me that's that relevant about the phone.
No.
And yeah, I just kind of feel like it's all a bit same-ish.
The one somewhat novel thing, I suppose, that I think you were going to say before is hooking it up to a monitor and having it sort of act somewhat PC-like.
Yes.
Which Microsoft tried with their Windows phones for a long time, and it was probably more useful than this is going to be, in all honesty. But that failed because no one wanted a Windows phone. So maybe if they keep honing in on this idea, maybe in 2-3 years it could be actually somewhat useful. I feel like this initial version, though, is going to be so limited as to, like, what's the point?
Well, so when you connect it up to a screen, it still only has the Android face with the Android apps. It's just you're seeing everything on a bigger screen. Is there going to be extra functionality?
Well, I mean, there's nothing stopping them from having apps that I guess they've built specifically for this purpose to detect that they're in that mode and then offer more features, have menu bars that actually make sense in the context of having sort of like a cursor and all that to make it better. But you're right, it's only going to be Android apps.
Yeah.
So it's not like you can put... Well, I think I was going to say it's not like you can put Word on this thing, but there is an Android version of Word. You can have that on this, but you wouldn't have the full Word document, PowerPoint sort of environment. So yeah, of limited use, I think. But maybe, maybe they've like partnered with Microsoft and other people to say, oh, look at how amazing it is in this mode.
Yeah,
If they've done that, maybe there's some value here. My feeling is they probably haven't done that, and there's really not that much to talk about. But we will see when they actually do the launch very shortly, I suppose.
Yes, we will. Okay. Well, yeah, no, I'm still not excited about it.
But even if that worked amazingly, what do you think of like the concept of that? If you had like a little PC that you were carrying around, and then wherever you plugged it into, it had all of your stuff ready to go, how you liked it configured, was powerful enough to do all your work and, go 10, 15 years in the future, powerful enough to play all your games.
Well, okay, yeah, of course. I mean, obviously from a business sense, that would be amazing. And
hot desking.
Well, exactly, yeah. Like you would, instead of having to move a computer or having to move anything really, you would just, in an office, you would just literally have a phone that you would get, and that phone would be your workstation. And you just plug it into whatever desk you happen to be sitting at, and that was that. I don't really know if that's exactly what this technology is going to be offering, though. I mean, obviously the smart thing to do would be to really try and invest in it, because it does seem like it could potentially be the way of the future, but it just depends on how far they're actually able to take it, I guess. And if I am just opening up this particular mode and then I'm seeing my normal apps pop up and I've got to open, whatever, like Google Sheets or Google Docs or...
That's true. All the Google stuff should work fairly well.
Yeah. I mean, it'd be useful, but most offices at the moment use Microsoft stuff. You're right. So they would have to have a kind of deal with Microsoft so that you could then have the full Office suite on your phone in a way that it could be accessed through this mode for it to even be remotely useful.
I do like how in the video they show him hooking it up to the monitor, and then it's got like a mouse pad on the phone. I'm like, okay, with you so far. And then the keyboard pops up on the phone. I'm like, all right, that's a little far. I think you probably still need a proper keyboard to do real work.
Yeah.
And this little tiny on-screen thing.
Yeah.
But I guess in a pinch.
No, yeah. Look, I mean, all of this technology is going to be a bit clunky when it's new.
Thanks again for joining me, Alex.
Not a problem, David. Pleasure as always.
You can follow and get in touch with us on Twitter at Tangential Soup, and you can find this week's show notes and more information about today's topics at tsp.fm/34. If you enjoyed today's episode, please consider sharing it with anyone you think might also, and we'll talk to you again next week. Bye.
Ciao.
How's your new fitness regime going?
I wouldn't really say it's going so much as not going.
You said you were a bit exhausted the other night.
Yeah, I'm just finding, because I'm kind of picking up more and more responsibility at work, it's just getting harder to maintain that type of lifestyle, I guess.
Harder to fit everything in. Are you still doing karate training as regularly as you had been previously last year?
No. Well, usually last year I was kind of getting a couple of training sessions in a week. This year I've been managing one a week so far, if that. I don't think I've been quite twice in a week, so yeah, like it's a bit of a struggle to kind of maintain that type of ongoing training while I'm working longer hours, and also as well, work just feels more exhausting at the moment. I think because I just have more stuff to do while I'm there.
Are you working longer hours, are you?
Well, it's not that my hours have actually changed. It's just that there's more work and I have to stay longer to get it done. So, well, yes, I am working longer hours, but my hours themselves haven't changed. It's just the work hours.
Unpaid overtime.
Yeah. Well, I wouldn't really say I'm too bad. Like, sometimes I'll get home on time and it's fine. And if I'm actually done with all my work a little bit early, usually I'll just go home early because I know that I've done the overtime on the other days.
Yeah.
And it does happen, but it really just doesn't happen that often. So more often than not, I'd be doing some overtime every day.
Mm. Well, don't burn out, young Alex.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's hard to maintain. But I mean, you work fairly long hours, don't you?
Well, recently my whole team has not really had a whole lot of work to do, so not so much in this year, but last year definitely there was quite a few late nights getting things done.
Yeah.
So I suppose it ebbs and flows.
Yeah, well,
as long as it's not constant.
That's it. Yeah, you have to kind of give yourself a break. And we're going through a bit of a transformative period in this company as well. We're kind of moving record keeping systems, so there's a lot of work on for everybody. And I think we're going to start doing weekend days as well. So it seems quite likely we're just going to be doing Saturdays for the next few weeks.
Oh no!
Fully paid, obviously, but
yeah, but that sucks.
Yeah, that's just the way it is.
6-day week.
I kind of feel like the weekday work is a lot harder because, like, part of my job, unfortunately for me, seems to be managing like our relationship with our advisors, which isn't really what I want to be doing. But yeah, so that's kind of part of my my role.
And they wouldn't be working weekends.
Yeah, that doesn't happen on the weekend. It's just, and the weekend work's actually going to be completely different work. We've got to do some system testing stuff, which isn't really hugely fun, but that's just the way it goes, I guess.
You'd think they'd have other people to do that sort of thing.
You would think that, wouldn't you, David?
Well, yes, I would. System testing, that doesn't really sound like in... I mean, maybe like the very final, like, here, have a bit of a play around with this, sign it off, see if there's any problems. But like up until that point, yeah, someone else, I would imagine, would be doing that. But anyway, clearly not.
No. Yes. I mean, of course, that should be the way that it is. It's been a bit of a point of contention, but yeah, we're doing the users are going to be doing the system testing. Not that I would necessarily say that we necessarily have the resources for it, but
don't you have dedicated testing people? If it's any sort of business with scale,
we do have dedicated system testing people. But for whatever reason, for this project, they just A, don't seem to be available, and B, there just doesn't seem to be the resources for it. So I don't know why, but that's the way it are.